Hello, welcome, English DP, HL, Language A at Sunway. We're diving right into The Knight's Tale by Geoffrey Chaucer, but first let's do a quick recap of the context of the story. So, Chaucer's writing this around 1380 AD. This is still a couple hundred years before Shakespeare, who happened to copy Chaucer quite a bit. And Chaucer writes the story of a storytelling competition among a group of pilgrims. These pilgrims represent all walks of life in medieval England. There's a knight, a miller, pardoner, innkeeper, monk, etc. They're leaving from the Tabard Inn in London and walking all the way to the Canterbury Cathedral, where St. Thomas was Becket. St. Thomas Becket was murdered by King Henry II of England, roughly 200 years before this. Now, it's considered a holy shrine. He's now a saint. And 3 years after he was murdered, the Pope declared him a saint. And so people come here for healing and for pardoning of their sins and all sorts of things. And so there's a mix of reasons why they're together. And Chaucer captures that. Not everybody's motivations are the most holy. And so this is about 100 kilometers from London. It's probably about a 4-day journey. Quite the journey, lots of time to tell great stories. Usually it would take about 4 days to get there. Now, one of the amazing things about Chaucer as an author is how well he noticed the details about people, both in the way they dressed and the subtle changes in how each person spoke. He paid attention to people from all walks of life. So if you pay attention to how they tell the story, the language they use, and the way some are more vulgar, some are more pious, some are educated, and some are clearly not, there are hundreds of, and even thousands of little details of characterization by Chaucer that makes this story so good. That's one of the best things about Chaucer, is he's so observant. He's also hilarious. He loves to make fun of everybody, whether rich or poor, especially hypocrisy, when a person pretends to be something they're not, whether brave or holy or good, and really they're just selfish or cowardly. He shows by little details kind of the opposite of what they're trying to present. And that's one of the delightful parts of this whole tale. So the first person to go is the knight. And we can tell a lot of things right away just by the fact that he goes first. So maybe he's a bit proud, arrogant, thinks he's better than people, that he deserves to go first. We do know he's high up in the social ladder. To be a knight back then, you had to own land, you had to own a horse, have a squire, and be able to leave for long times for all these adventures and pilgrimages. And he's probably pretty intimidating too, with this sword and a horse, so nobody disagrees with him going first. His is also the longest of all the tales, and that shows he's a bit of a windbag, and again, nobody dare challenge him or tell him to shut up, unlike the character of Chaucer, who is basically booed and interrupted until he finally quits talking later on in the tale. So the tale begins, and enter 2 knights and a lady, Palamon Arcite, the cousins, and Emily, the beautiful lady who steals their hearts. So, we remember that the purpose of this whole storytelling competition, the innkeeper says that whoever tells the best story is going to get a free meal. And at the end of this pilgrimage, of course, everyone else pays as they go back to his inn. So it's a good deal for the innkeeper. But the best story is determined by the most entertaining and also the most helpful, or the best moral lesson. And so the Knight's Tale leans towards the moral side. It's filled with moralistic ideas and elevated language, courtly love, romance, and high philosophical themes and speeches. He's trying to wow you with a tale of love, violence, and philosophy of all things. So, some of the questions. In the prologue, it talks about the knight that he was part of 15 different crusading battles. So what can we learn from that? Well, Terry Jones of Monty Python fame did some research into those battles and found that they're pretty much the worst examples of crusading behavior in history. It would have been difficult, but maybe physically possible for him to be at all those battles. But Chaucer really wanted to show that he took part in the worst rapes and pillaging and stealing by these supposedly holy knights. And so even though he presents himself as this high-minded, chivalric ideal, he's actually probably not a good person. And this is from the genre of courtly love. And so that affects the formation of the story because it needs to show that love is worth sacrificing everything for. It needs to show the high ideals that love often ends in pain. And the men are the center of the story. The women have almost no voice, and they don't get a say in things. But women are also idealized and idolized, so men will do anything for them and treat them as just perfect. And so that's one of the reasons why courtly love, nobody's ever married, because if you're married, you realize, oh, they're not perfect. So Chaucer actually used an ancient French poem. The French poem was actually 4 times the length of this story, so he cut it down from like 9,800 words to 2,500 words. And he also changed a lot of things. All the major philosophical speeches are Chaucer's own, and he changed some other details to make it fit in. We also know from history that he had actually written this tale before starting the Canterbury Tales, but it fits so well, so he included it. Okay, and the other interesting thing about this story is religion and mythology. Chaucer is likely a Christian, writing in Christian Europe, and yet he uses all the Greek gods, Mars, Diana, and their fate is decided by these gods. And so it's more of a literary device in a place where anything from Greece or Rome is considered more intellectual, more worthy of praise. So that's why mythology is here. It shows kind of the battle with fate, too. You know, if there's only one god, then it wouldn't be quite as much excitement when 3 people all pray to the same god. But if each person prays to a different god, then there's kind of that struggle and conflict in heaven. And so it creates some tension in the story. So what's Chaucer's purpose here? He's trying to tell, through the knight, a moralistic story, but also show the knight's character and maybe how boring he is through the story. But it is somewhat exciting of a story. But it does show his chauvinism as well. So there's a lot of layers to everything that Chaucer writes. That's really important. So what we see at the surface is the events, the actions, and details of the story. If you go a little bit lower, you can see what they represent. So hidden motivations, desires, and justifications of the character. Below that are the clues. Each of the things that they mention, the way they dress, and even the specific language they use reveal aspects of the characters, and often that they would rather keep hidden. So the building blocks Chaucer uses comes from all sorts of things. Full stories, poems, allusions. He kind of combines them all together in his own unique way. So in this story specifically, he uses Greek mythology, he uses this French poem, and he turns it in, and then speeches. So the philosophy, the consolation of Boethius, he uses extensively in this poem. The fact that it's only through philosophy that we can kind of find peace and make meaning of our life. So the courtly love, this is the genre of the poem. We'll just do an example. The fresh beauty slet me suddenly of here the romet in the yonder place, and but I my saying here at the last way, I am but dead, there is no more to say. So that Middle English, just love it. So Artseat's claiming here that he will die if he cannot see Emily every day. And it comes directly from the courtly love tradition. The idea is that the beloved is supposed to be so central to the lover's being that a separation from her is like a separation from one's heart or soul, which can cause death. So love and fate are intertwined. Here's another example. Love hath his fiery dart so brenningly ysteked through my true careful heart. The sharpened was my death, erst than my shelter. Arcite says that his death, or succumbing to love, was shapen or constructed before his shirt, which means swaddling shirt. So basically, before he's even a baby, it's like he's been hit with Cupid's arrow. He's destined to fall in love with Emily, and there's nothing he can do about it. So he basically just has to follow his heart. It's impossible to choose anything else. And so this idea of fate brings tension to the story, because both of these cousins absolutely love, apparently, Emily, and yet they feel like they have no choice. They're going to have to fight to the death, or at least to the major injury, until one of them can win Emily's heart and brings them. So then one of the themes come out that this story is with the amazing lengths we will go for love. But then the question is, how come nobody ever asks Emily? Like they treat her so well. They say she's like my destiny. if you truly loved her, why not just ask her, you choose who to marry? But that doesn't happen. Instead, they just, let's get 202 people, 2 different armies to kind of battle each other, and then whoever wins gets to marry Emily. So, and just again, a short summary of the poem. Theseus has just captured Hippolyta from Scythia, and then he got a sister-in-law, Emily. So pretty successful. Along the way, they meet a group of crying women. They beg Theseus to take vengeance on Creon, the king of Thebes, because of his refusal to allow them to give their husband's body a proper burial. Theseus agrees, beats Creon, and in the profits he wins 2 noble Theban hostages, Palamon and Arcite. So they're pretty rich guys. From a Marxist perspective, pretty much all the men are fairly rich in the story, and they're kind of oppressing the women and also the lower class. Like, where did these 200 warriors come from, and why are they fighting possibly to the death to help each of these guys win the love of their life? They don't seem to have any skin in the game, and yet they're being oppressed, likely because of finances. So gender equality part 2. Theseus beat the Amazons and won a wife from them. Palamon and Arcite have to fight in order to win Emily as a wife. They're all about defending a woman, but not about listening to a woman. The system of patriarchy is deep. So courtly love kept women on an impossible pedestal. It just treated them as these holy angels and never really saw them as real, flawed, weak, or strong women. And so it kept them in this impossible ideal, and because of that, there was an unrealistic, exaggerated quality to it. Part 3. And so women in the story have almost no agency. Hippolyta and Emily plead that Theseus don't kill Palamon and Arcite, and then he doesn't. So they have like a little bit of power, but they never really do anything. It's all the men doing the action. And so that's kind of one of the downsides of the story, but it shows the downsides of the knight's point of view. Because in other stories, there's some really powerful women. The Wife of Bath comes to mind. And so this is showing that the knight is clearly chauvinistic, doesn't believe in the agency of women or even really listening to them. And also coming up is the trial by combat. It was a pretty common thing back then. They believed that if God controls everything, then whoever's guilty would be lose, and whoever is innocent, it'll be proven through combat. And so it was a pretty reasonable way to decide who's guilty or innocent. And then the other big theme is freedom and imprisonment. The kind of the moral quandary of the story that we don't really see as a big moral quandary anymore is one of them is freed from prison but has to leave the country. And so is it better to be freed but banished from the woman you love, or the other one who is trapped in prison and can see her every day, but he's trapped? So is it better to be free but away from the woman you love, or see the woman you love but be imprisoned? This big question of the novel. So, and then finally, the philosophy in the tale. There's a lot of philosophy, and again, this is added by Chaucer. One is that joy follows sorrow. When one's fortunes are up, another person's are down. There's an instability to human joy. And so we can see that, things go good, and then they go down, and then they go good. And there's this whole idea of this kind of like Ferris wheel here. You can see it's called the Wheel of Fortune. And now that that's a game show, but they used to believe everything was decided by fate. And she had this wheel, and it would pull you up and elevate you and give you money and happiness and all the things you long for. But just as quickly, it would keep turning, and you would fall to ruin and lose everything you wanted. And so it was also kind of this idea of a zero-sum game where, okay, if Palamon gets the woman he loves, then obviously Arcite doesn't, and so he's going to be sad. So he falls off this Wheel of Fortune, and Palamon is taken to the top. And also Theseus, when he's so successful in all these wars, he has to realize that he has to be generous to others because he's been very lucky. And so people's fate determines their lives, not so much their own free choices. Courtly love is physical pain, and we see a lot of the chivalric code of knights. And then finally, it is wisdom to accept willingly what we may not avoid. Very stoic philosophy there. And all these pagan philosophies, rather than a Christian outlook, just show that Rome still influences England roughly 800 years after they finally left Britannia. I hope you enjoyed reading this and watching this video.